So, this is why all the prophets, part of their life, before being prophets, they have been shepherds. To learn patience. We will put some notes while we are going, and then we'll come back to it. So this is number one. This is number one. So one of the main issues we learn from the root of the other Arabic language. Because actually in English, the word leadership comes from one main understanding. Means you are in the front. Lead in English, you are in the front. But in Arabic, it has wider understanding. This is why I'm coming to the Arabic root. What are the other terms that is used in the Quran or also in the Hadith of the Prophet expressing leadership in general? And some of this term in the Quran we even translate as dua. We make dua. Yes.
Imam.
Imam.
No, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about Prophet Ibrahim, in Ibrahim kana.
Yes, true. But we'll come to this. This is a higher level of leadership. But the word is imam. وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. We just talked about dua and people use it in that. May Allah make us leaders for the muttaqeen. All of us are reading. All of us. Not only one or male and female. All of us. So, imam is the other term. The term imam in Arabic means leader. It doesn't mean the person who just leads the prayers. This is a misunderstanding. It's not true. And it doesn't mean the ustaz. It's part of the meaning. Or the people who lead the prayers. But actually, imam in Arabic language means leader. And this one in the Quran, this term has been repeated in different contexts. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا. We made from them leaders who guide people by our own command. And then also, people will come on the day of judgment with their own leader. You like Mr. X or Ms. Y as a leader, you will come on the day of judgment with your leader. Hopefully your leader will help you. But actually they will not. But the Quran is telling it in a sarcastic way. Okay? So, Imam is also another expression for leader. Imam is another expression for leader. But the interesting thing, if we go to the texts, to the... how many of you in Islamic studies? How many of you in Islamic studies? Raise your hand. Now I need to see your hand up like this. You're still sleeping, everybody like this. Raise your hand up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? So we have many mashayikh. Ra'in and Imam, both of them coming into different contexts in the Islamic sources. When I refer to Islamic sources, I'm referring to what? Quran and Sunnah. When I refer to Islamic sources, I'm referring to Quran and Sunnah. So the word Ra'in and the word Imam coming into different contexts. Both of them mean leader. But at the same time, they are coming into different contexts. Anybody can tell me anything about this? Okay. Ra'in always, when it is used in the texts, in the original text of Islam, will come in a positive manner. A good leader. Coming in a positive manner. Good leader. So the word ra'in is always. Why? Because the word itself having this meaning. The word itself, as we mentioned, it talks about accountability, about taking care, about all of these type of things. The word imam, when it comes in the Quran, for example, and also comes in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, it might be positive and might be negative. Allah described Fir'aun in the Quran as imam, but imam guiding his people to hellfire. So the word imam comes sometimes positive and sometimes negative. Means the word imam can be used for good leadership and can be used for bad leadership. And this is another important concept also from Islamic perspective. Leadership can be very good and can be very bad. And both of them are leaders. Who is the greatest leader in the negative sense? Who is the greatest leader from Islamic perspective in the negative sense?
Shaitan.
Iblis. Iblis is a great leader. Yeah, of course, he is a great leader. But in the negative sense. Huh? Ad-Dajjal, another leader. But this leader we will not see now. But Iblis we have been encountering every day. So, he is a great leader in the negative. He can persuade people. He can make people go to certain directions.
هو يراكم من حيث لا
Ah.
ترونه.
And he's also very patient. He's very, very patient. He made a commitment with Allah since the beginning. لَأُقْعِدَنَّ لَهُمْ. He made a pledge to Allah. I will make them going astray. And the guy is very consistent. Working very hard.
Resolute.
Okay, so the word here, the word imam in the Islamic culture is a leader, but sometimes used in a negative sense, in a bad leadership, and in a positive, good leadership. But the word ra'in is always used in the Islamic context in a positive sense. In a positive sense. Okay? Yes, of course, after this, Muslims have been using different terms, but more of these terms are into political context, like, for example, Khalifa, Amir, and sometimes also they use the Sultan or anything like this. But these are new terms in the political context. But as I mentioned, the idea of leadership in Islam is much more broader than political position. All of us are leaders, male or female. All of us are leaders, male or female. Okay, this is very important, in fact, because, as I mentioned, when we talk about leadership from Islamic perspective, we have to refer to the language that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used for the Quran. This is how we can understand the context. But if we use the English word, it will be a bit misleading. It will be a bit misleading. Okay? Good. And as I mentioned, the word qiyada is a modern translation. The word qiyada, qa'id, and qiyada, they are considered a modern translation. It's not used in the older texts commonly. It's not used in the older texts commonly. Okay? Now, all of you, your handphones are working in this room?
Yes.
Huh? Okay, very good. Because I will give you some exercise while we are talking. Okay, one of the main concepts in the leadership, or main issues in the leadership from an Islamic perspective, is One of the very important concepts in Islam is the concept of obedience, الطاعة, obedience. Though of course many people will mispresent this concept, or sometimes many Muslims even misunderstand the concept, but the concept of obedience is a very important concept in the Islamic sources on different levels, And you cannot be a good leader without being a good follower. You cannot be a good leader without being a good follower. Why? Because when you are a follower, you can understand the impact of leadership on you. When you are a follower, you understand the impact of leadership on you. For example, all of you are postgraduate. All of you have supervisors. The supervisor in your case is a leader. The supervisor in your case is a leader. You cannot be a good supervisor without being a good student. You cannot be a good supervisor later without being a good student. If you are a naughty student now, you will never be a good supervisor, most probably. Because you don't understand. And you didn't learn. Part of the concept is actually to promote the learning process from Islamic perspective. Part of the importance of obedience, ta'ah, in Islam is to promote the learning process. You cannot be a good learner without sitting, listening attentively, and following. You cannot be. For example, if you are attending these classes because you are forced to attend and people make you wake up early in the morning and then you just come to sign in the attendance sheet. Practically, you are wasting your time. Yes, you are wasting your time. I'm wasting my time because you're not learning anything. You're not learning anything. You just come to sign. So you have wasted 1, 2, 3 hours of your time. And you have wasted also my time. Fruitless. Because you have not been. People tell you, okay, this is part of your training. If you are a good follower, you will try to see the benefit of these instructions. So when you come to attend, you try to learn something, you try to engage in debate, you try to add to your knowledge somehow. But if you just come and sit down and being in a sleeping mode until the lecture will end, and then you go out after this, you wasted our time. The same thing also goes for many different levels of obedience in Islam, which people unfortunately, the concept of obedience, there was a very great scholar here in this university, but he left, Sudanese, Dr. Ibrahim Zain. He used to call, he said, the concept of obedience in Islam is a very civilized concept. Why? Because it promotes the harmony and the peace. It promotes learning process, and it promotes good leadership. When we talk about obedience, people will always have in mind blind obedience. But Islam, it has never been blind obedience. It has never been. When we talk about obedience, for example, of the political leadership at a certain level, we talk that those people will follow the instruction as long as this instruction in Islam said in ma'ruf. So Islam put restrictions. Follow is restriction. When Islam say, for example, a good wife needs to be obedient to the husband, again, in ma'ruf. Anybody in disobedience of Allah. So, for example, if the husband will tell the wife to do something against Islam, she needs to revolt against him. But she cannot revolt all the time. Otherwise, there is no marriage, actually. There is no marriage. Okay? So the concept of being a good follower is a very important concept in the Islamic tradition. Why? Because it helps us to learn and it helps the community on the individual level learning, on the community level harmony. Imagine that everybody is revolting against everybody. What kind of community? And everybody objecting against everybody. What kind of community you are having here?
Anarchy.
Anarchy, yes. Anarchy. There's no community anymore. And there's no process anymore. But at the same time, these are binded by being in ma'ruf. Goodness. So this obedience is mainly in goodness. If there is sinful act, no obedience. If there is something against Islam somehow, so obedience in Islam is not a blind obedience. In fact, Quran attacks blind obedience. Anybody can tell me examples? Yes?
Example, but not from Quran, I was like in general. In war or the difference between a soldier, a normal soldier without beliefs, and the mujahid in Islam. Now we can see so many war crimes when they make investigation and ask the soldier, he will say, I was just following the order, like killing children, do so many massive things. But the difference is the mujahid is the one who go to war with the beliefs. If his leader tells him something against his belief, he's not going to follow.
Okay. This is very good. But anything from the Quran? Yes.
سورة البقرة هي استباق عن الذين اتبعوا من الذين اتبعوا ورأوا العذاب وتقطع بهم
Yes. And many statements, I think one of the many statements in the Quran. Following the forefather without thinking. The Quran attacks many times the blind following. So if somebody would come to me talk about obedience in Islam is blind following, I will tell him or I will tell her either you don't understand Islam or you are actually abusing the meaning. Because half of the Quran actually revolting against blind obedience. People worship idols because of blind obedience. People committed crimes because of blind obedience. So in Islam, it's called, they call it in Arabic like this: طاعة مبصرة وليست طاعة عمياء. The obedience in Islam is an obedience with sight. You know what you are doing. Not just you just follow.
وحتى هو الحديث إنما استطعت بمعروف الجنود مع قائد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أرسله وأشعل لهم النار قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لو أطاعوها لو دخلوها ما خرجوا منها.
Yes, of course. ترجم الحديث يا شباب. There is a hadith that Tariq mentioned when some people they were under the leadership of one of the guys that the Prophet ﷺ sent. So he told them to go into fire. And people revolted, they didn't go into fire. And then when they come back to the Prophet ﷺ, they told him the story. And he said, if they went into fire following the orders of their leader, they will be in fire till the day of judgment. Very clear, very clear. So, one of the first qualities of leadership in Islam is to be a good follower. To be a good follower, because this will promote learning.
In mother language, that is equal to say you start from the basis, from the...
Yeah, of course, start from the basics. Because when you are small, and you attach to somebody who is more senior for you, and you try to learn from this person, then, of course, when you are in their position, you'll be much more better than them, because you have learned already.
علمهم شديد القوة.
Yeah, even the Prophet ﷺ, yeah. So, this number one. And the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay? So this is one of the main concepts in leadership from an Islamic perspective. To start by being a good follower. Then you will understand. Okay. Another thing that we mentioned on the side was to be patient. Patience, as-sabr. Actually, there is no leadership without patience. There is no leadership without patience. And this is why most of the leadership in the modern world are declining. Because people are happy when people are given a post of being, for example, a head of department, or a dean, or a rector, or a minister, or a prime minister, or president. People will be very happy. Actually, you shouldn't. If you understand, you shouldn't be there. But when you are very happy, means you don't understand anything. If people are happy because they are taking responsibility of other people, just because of this, as some scholars said, they are idiots. Just idiots. Why? Because you will be responsible for each one of them. If you are okay, okay. So that's why in the old times, when people are put forced into leadership positions, most of the time they don't like it. Unless they are ordered to be so. Then they will do. You just follow. And the hadith of the Prophet, when somebody came to him and he said, "Oh Prophet of Allah, I want to be amil." Amil means like responsible for a group of people. This was a term equivalent now to be something like a minister or something like this. Then the Prophet replied for him the famous reply that all of us know. He said, "نحن لا نعطيها من سألها." We don't give the responsibility for people who are asking for it. Why? Because if you ask for responsibility, you are eager to get the responsibility. You don't understand the responsibility. You don't understand. If you understand, you better just be away. Unless people will force you to be there.
دكتور، لكن هذا ما يتعارض مع سيدنا يوسف لما قال له اجعلني على خزائن الارض.
No, this one was actually, he was telling a professional experience.
أمي علي حفيظ علي.
He was telling,
هو الآخر
Yusuf alayhi salam, the ruler of Egypt, asked him, and he said, I can be a good person to run the treasury of Egypt at this time. So this is actually, the Islamic scholar look at it as you are presenting your credentials. Just you are presenting your credentials. Whether people will put you or not is a different story.
That's why I stressed
Yeah.
أمي حفيظ علي.
So you can present your credentials. For example, if you are an engineer, you cannot say, when people ask you, have you been in engineering positions? Yes, I've been in engineering positions, I've been doing this and such and such. These are credentials. These are credentials. But I will not say, I will not say so. I want this position. Okay? So, especially in political leadership, because the responsibility in political leadership is much more higher. You tell people go this way, if they go, you can destroy the country. So all of those people will be, so anybody who is very happy to be in a political position, in fact, it's just like the scholar said, is an idiot. You should be very frightened, because you will be held accountable for each one. Even a husband, you'll be accountable for your wife and your kids. And this is not small responsibility. Allah will ask you what you have done. Why you didn't give her this? Why you didn't do this for her? How did you deal with your kids? What did you do? You are able to answer? If you are able to answer, then you go ahead. We are talking about 2, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people. Head of department, you have under you maybe 20 people. Dean, under you 200 people. Minister, under you few million. So that's why being patient, come back to this attribute, being patient is a very important feature of leadership. Any person who is not patient cannot fit into leadership. And this meaning came from, as I mentioned before, the word ra'in that the Prophet mentioned. Those people will be very, human beings are very annoying, by the way. Very annoying creatures. Human beings are very, and we are very annoying creatures.
فكان الإنسان أكثر شيء جدلا.
We are not happy with many things. We are always objecting. We want this, we want that. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, when he talked about the believer, المؤمن الذي يخالط الناس ويصبر على أذاهم خير من الذي لا يخالط الناس. The believer who will mingle with people and will be able to sustain the harm of the people. Once you are mingling with human beings, you will have harm inflicted on you. Clear cut. But if you sustain this, if you are able to sustain this and keep your objectives clear, you are much better than the people who will isolate themselves. So this is on the level of just mingling, not on the level of leading. Okay? So patience is a very important issue. Is a very important issue in leadership. Without patience, you cannot have a good leader. Again, this from Islamic perspective. I'm not talking about Western perspective. Western perspective, you can go ahead and read down many books, many you can do. I'm supposed to talk about from the Quran, the Quranic perspective. Okay, what are the other features in the Quran also or in the Hadith of the Prophet about leadership? So the first feature is the issue of obedience, being a good follower. The second feature is patience. And what are the other features?
القوي الأمين.
Huh?
القوي الأمين.
Okay.
Set an example in yourself.
Okay. I'll come to, yeah, these things are all, but I will put them in a different order. So, another very important concept, lead by example. Lead by example. Islam stressed on a very important concept. Don't talk much. Don't talk much. This is why the Prophet she said, لو أحصى السامع كلامه لأحصاه. الله عليه وسلم. If somebody wants to count the words that he is saying, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they can count. But for our case, of course, uncountable. The other thing also, which is more than in the Quran, Allah talked about the people who are saying more than they are doing. لِمَ تَقُولُونَ مَا what does it mean كبر مقتا?
So share.
Not only so shame. Most hated
Quarrels.
when Allah hates an action, what will be the consequence? What will be the consequences? So all the early Muslims, when you read the biography of the companions of the Prophet, of the great scholars, they didn't talk much. They talk what they have to say. That's it. And their actions are speaking louder, which now people call it English. You walk the talk. You walk the talk.
أتأمرون الناس بالبر
وتنسون أنفسكم. Many statements in the Quran. So lead by example is the main feature of leadership in Islam. It's not leading by talking. Some people like to lead by talking. Every time he or she will come to the public, if any problem, they come and talk. But people look at their action. What this guy is saying? He's saying something and he's doing something else. Or she's saying something and she's doing something else. Definitely nobody will follow. Definitely nobody will follow. If you tell your children don't smoke and they see you smoking. If you tell your children don't lie and they see you and the mother lying all the time. Do you feel that your children will follow you? Yes.
Wouldn't that be hypocrisy?
Huh?
Wouldn't be that hypocrisy?
Yeah, it's so the same goes for any other position. When you are in an organization and you are a manager, and you tell people how you have to do this, and blah, 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 and you're not doing any of these things. Of course, people will not follow you. Actually, among themselves, they will make fun of you. They'll be just afraid to confront you because they might be sacked or anything. But among themselves, they'll make fun of you. And the same also for your kids. Your kids will make fun of you if you are telling them things that you are not following, but will be among themselves. Among themselves, they say, Baba is saying nonsense, or Mama is saying nonsense. Okay? So lead by example. Lead by example. And as I mentioned, from where we got this one? The action of the Prophet ﷺ. Even the Prophet ﷺ in many things, teaching people many things, he will use visual. Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. You pray as you see me. not give them a very long lecture about how to pray. He just told them, look at me, and you do as I do. That's it. Finish.
قدوة.
And when he made the Hajj, the last, خذوا عني مناسككم. So he just made the Hajj and he told people, just follow what I'm doing. Just follow. He didn't give them a very long lecture about Hajj, the importance of Hajj and what to do and what not to do. He just told them, you just look at me and follow. So even the seerah will stress on this idea. You just see the leader, and then you follow. But if the leader will give you a very long khutbah, very long sermon, and blah blah blah, and he or she is not doing what they have supposed to do, then it's not. Okay. Another thing also, which we may call competencies. Now that in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, inni hafidun
حليم.
halim.
قال جعلني على خزائن الأرض إني حفيظ عليم.
Hafidun alim. And then also when the lady described Musa when she was telling her father, she described him as al-qawiyul amin, having the strength and trustworthy. These are individual features. These are individual features. These individual features is what we call now as competencies. So when you are prepared, or you try to prepare yourself to a leadership position, and all of us need to be prepared. Not to be prepared by looking at the position, no, but being prepared by training ourselves. Being prepared by training ourselves. Part of it, how do we know that? اخشوشنوا فإن
النعمة لا تدوم.
اخشوشنوا فإن النعمة لا تدوم. You try to be rough, don't be very soft, living a luxurious life, relaxed. You have to roughen yourself a little bit because the blessings of Allah might not be sustained for some reason. Maybe Allah will test you, maybe we don't know.
أظن في الحديث أذكر لما وجد الرجل قال له هذه يد يحبها الله ورسوله يعني.
So this is preparation for the public. Preparation for the public. Don't try to tend to live in a soft manner, even if you have the facilities. And if you know Allah will give you money and other things, you try to roughen yourself. Why? Because you need to be prepared. You need to be prepared for any emergency.
I can say here in other words, charisma of character of the leader.
Yeah, this will come to it. I will come to the charisma. Charisma is not actually a competency because you cannot develop it. Charisma, as many people, I will explain this later, it's a kind of our type of thing. And I will talk about it. But charisma cannot be developed. Charisma cannot be developed. But what I'm talking about is competency. So, for example, if I experience the rough life, if I become a leader, I understand what rough life means. I understand. So when I guide people, I understand what the answer is. Because I was like them. I was like them. Okay? You cannot bring, for example, head of department for an academic unit. This guy have never been an academic. He will not understand because he didn't go through the same problems that those people are going through. So for him, it will be just a managing position. You do that, but he doesn't understand, or she doesn't understand. So you have to go through. So for the competencies, Islam talked about some of them, but are relevant to the thing. So one of the competencies we know from the Quran is strength.
السطح العلمي والجسم.
Yes. Strength. Strength will be on all directions, spiritual and physical. Spiritual and physical. What we mean by spiritual is very important. You cannot be a leader and then if a disaster will happen to the people you are leading, you will collapse and cry like them. Why you are leading those people? You cannot. You just go aside. You cannot lead. You cannot lead.
Spiritual intelligence.
Yeah. So you have the spiritual strength. Means you will not be affected. Nobody is forcing you to problem. Nobody is. But what we are saying that the people in position of leadership, they need to have a high quality. They understand that life is not easy, life is difficult. And they understand that this difficulty will happen. So whenever they are faced with it, they can go over it. They will not collapse and cry. They will not collapse and cry. So this is what I mean by spiritual. You have always hope. Because Iman is hope. Basically, Iman is hope. Faith is hope. Even if we are in the darkest position. Yusuf was in the well, and he was hoping that Allah would save him. Though there is no sign of anything that will save him. The same also, he was in the jail, and there is no sign for him to go out. But he was hoping to go out. Why he have this? Because of Iman. Nothing else. Because there's no human interpretation for this. Leadership needs to have a very high spiritual competency, a belief, a determined belief, unshakable. Otherwise, you cannot lead people. You cannot. The other thing, of course, physical. Physical in the sense, I'm not talking about if he is a man, for example, he would be a bodybuilding guy. No, I'm not. I'm talking about physical, that he or she can sustain the responsibility. Not every time you will be sick, for example. You cannot have a leader every 2 days he is sick in the hospital, or she is sick in the hospital. Of course he cannot lead. They cannot. So physically means you are fit. You try to be fit. Another competency that also we know from the Quran mentioned, being ameen, trustworthy. Salam. This one is al-quwwa. This one is al-aman. So you have to be trustworthy. Trustworthy. How we train ourselves. The hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So people will lie until they will be habitual liars, and then they will be sent to hellfire. And people will seek being trustworthy until they will be labeled as trustworthy. So trustworthiness is an exercise. Everyday exercise. You miss a class, and then you went and you try to make a story to your teacher that he will excuse you. You are building up a story. And teacher once, and you find it very easy. So let me build stories every time. So you are building stories every time. You are now a habitual liar. Very simple. Just habitual liar. But you have to face it. I'm sorry, you have to be honest. I'm sorry, I overslept. That's it. Why you didn't do well in the exam? I'm sorry, I didn't study well. Honest. You train yourself to be an honest person, you'll be an honest person. You train yourself to be a habitual liar, you'll be a great habitual liar. Yeah. You'll be a great habitual liar. So trustworthiness is an everyday exercise for a Muslim. Everyday exercise for a Muslim. Okay? Third one. Alim, knowledge.
لعلمه الذين يستنبطونه منهم.
Actually, Islam told us, all of us, whether we are in positions or not, we have to seek knowledge. And you have to seek the relevant knowledge. You have to seek the relevant knowledge. And if some of you are interested to read more about this, I strongly recommend that you read the Bab al-Ilm. Imam Abu Hamd al-Ghazali explained in details many interesting features of learning process of knowledge. And one of the things that there is something he called wajib al-waqt. Wajib al-waqt, the obligation of the hour. What does it mean, obligation of the hour? Suddenly somebody posted you to be a head of department, but you have never been in management position before. You have never been in management position before. So the obligation of the hour for you is to try to learn how to be a good manager. هذا فرض الوقت. But some people will be in position and they will never even open a book about how to be a good manager. If you don't like to read, like many people now, you try to attend the class. You try to watch YouTube. You try to do anything. Because this is the obligation of the hour. You have to learn to be a good person. If you plan to get married, a husband or a wife, before you go and get married, you try to read a little bit about what is the features of the good husband, what are the features of the good wife, before you are getting married. It's not automatic. It has never been automatic. It's not automatic. You are getting married and you'll be a good wife or you'll be a good husband. No, it's not automatic. It's not automatic. You have to learn. And this is for you, wajib al-waqt. This is the obligation of the hour. Obligation of the hour. And Ghazali said a very interesting thing. He said, it's actually not important to learn things of fiqh that you are not going to do. Yeah, for example, you don't learn about Hajj before you do your Hajj. When you plan to do Hajj, then you need to read about it. Then you will know what. Selling and buying. If you are poor and you have nothing to sell, nothing to buy, except yourself, maybe a penny today. Then you don't need to read anything about selling and buying. And it's not your business actually. You are wasting your time now. You need to read things which are more important. More important. Okay? So, knowledge, yes, you have to have the knowledge that are required for your current situation. You have to have the knowledge that is important for your current situation. And according to Muslim scholars, as I mentioned, Ghazali is one of them actually. that this knowledge is an obligation, fard. Why? Because if you don't do that, you are held accountable as negligent. You'll be held accountable as a negligent. I'm getting married, I'm having kids. Do you know how to raise kids now in this time? No, but it will become automatic. And nothing is automatic. Nothing is automatic. And then after you destroy the future of your kids, you start to read about raising kids. Brother, too late. Sister, too late. Finished. Done already.
Sometimes Allah give you this weakness to be a leader or king, like we say about Talut, Surah Al-Baqarah. وزادوا علما.
Yeah, of course. Sometimes Allah will give features, but these features will be developed also. Yani sometimes, yes, leadership is part of it is given. Nobody argue with part of the leadership. A good leader. But the majority of it is training. The majority of it is training. And what will make difference between a great leader and others, sometimes those great leaders have to get to be leaders. So true, yes, of course. Knowledge, so strength, trustworthiness, knowledge. These are personal features. That's Islamic strength. To learn, continuously learn. Whenever there is something you need to learn. There's a very beautiful statement by great scholar Bayruni. Anybody heard of him? Abu Rayhan Bayruni.
أيوه.
Yeah.
وكتب كتابه عن الهند هذا.
Any other heard of the great scholar Bayruni? Two people. My stack people. So stack people, you have to know this, otherwise you'll be fired.
famous scholar.
It's a famous scholar. He wrote actually the first good history about India. The first scientific history about India is written by Bayruni. And he has, of course, a lot of contribution to geometry, mathematics, and other things. But Bayruni, when he was dying, some of his colleagues, scholars, went to see him. And then there was a kind of a problem that has been in his mind about inheritance. The distribution of inheritance in Islam is a complicated scenario, especially if you have a big family or something like this. So when his friend came to him, this guy, he was a faqih. So he asked him, I want to understand this specific issue about inheritance. And his friend told him, yeah, you are dying. He said, yes, better to die knowing rather to die ignorant. Yes. You see the spirit? You see the spirit? Better to die knowing rather to die ignorant. I'm interested to know this one. I know, I'm an engineering guy, I'm a mechanical engineer. I remember one of the professors of my professor. He was a German professor. And this guy is quite well known. He passed away long time. My professor was telling me that he went to see him, and this guy was about 95 years old. The German professor was 95 years old. And he was telling him, my professor was asking him, what are you doing now? He said, there are a few problems I want to solve. I am planning actually after 5 years to publish a book about this. After 5 years, he will be 100 years. He will be 100. And he said, I'm planning to publish a book after 5 years on this specific problem. I've been working on it for about 20 years or so. You see the spirit. This is Islamic spirit, actually.
The mindset,
Islamic spirit.
The mindset also.
Mindset. Not 95 years. Not even 95. Some people now say, 6 years. I'm old. I'm going to die. Yes, we are all going to die. We are all going to die. True. But we don't know when.
Die empty.
Okay? So, the spirit of seeking knowledge is an Islamic spirit. If you don't have it, talk about anything. Better not to talk about anything. Okay? The last point I will talk about, because I think 10, 15. Of course, many things, but I will open the question. The issue of charisma that brother mentioned now, charisma. What is this charisma? Many people will talk about those leaders have charisma. Can we create charisma? Actually, we can create a fake charisma. Yes. Yeah. True. Media can create a fake charisma. This is very well known. You follow, if you read the news, if people want, they call it in English, to polish somebody. Polish, you know what's polishing? Huh? So to polish somebody, the media can polish this person to be a great person. But once you try to come closer to this person, he or she, you will discover that this guy is potato head.
Faker.
Artificial.
But sir, now propaganda has to do a lot with
Yes,
that.
ma. Media, people call it propaganda. Another, because propaganda, of course, is a Marxist term. So some people may use it, some people might not use it. So propaganda or media can create fake charisma. So you have some leaders because of the whole media around this leader, then you feel that this guy is a great person. But when you look at his action or her action, when you try to come close to this person, you discover that this guy is a complete idiot. But the media made him or made her a very great leader. Yeah, true. This is a fact, actually. Yeah, many cases. But the fact is, there is something called charisma, yes. There is something called charisma. And this is what people call presence. In Arabic, they call it hudur. Presence means when the person will come, people will feel that this guy is not like the others. This is what we call charisma. Presence. When somebody will ask you, why this guy is not like the others, he will answer, I don't know, but I have a feeling. So it's not quantifiable issue. It's not something that you can quantify. Or you can scientifically assess. This is why it's called presence. The Prophet ﷺ having a great presence, many of the great scholars, some of them will have great presence. Many of also some political leaders historically, they have great presence. So it is this presence or charisma, this is something, of course, the Western analysis on charisma, they talk about, you might do this and do that and you will get charisma, but this is not guaranteed because many people will do what they are saying, but they will not get the charisma. So up till now, it's a very, there are some books on this actually, in English, many books on the issue of charisma in English. Because people want to understand it, they don't understand it. But for us Muslims, charisma is easier to understand. Easier to understand. In what sense? Can anybody tell me in what sense? Huh? Huruf? What do you mean by حضور? I mentioned حضور, but روح. Yes, but how? Okay, good.
You cannot see, but some people have energy.
Yes,
You
and
may say nothing, but you feeling.
yes, you feel the presence. This is true. But we have a statement to it. We have a statement. The Prophet has a statement. What he said, what the hadith? Our brothers and brothers and sisters. I assume you memorize Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, and what are you doing, guys? What are you doing? The hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If Allah likes somebody, Allah will tell His angels, I like this person. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يضع له القبول في الأرض. He will be accepted. Allah will make people like him or like him. And you don't understand why. There's no reason. There's no reason. You don't understand. And on the opposite side, if Allah hates somebody, Allah will make people hate this person. And also you don't understand why you hate this guy. You don't understand. I think many cases we know, sometimes you see people even claim to be a very good people and very good leaders or very big celebrities, and then you say, I don't like this guy. I have negative vibes when I see this guy. Yes, do you say this sometimes? I have negative vibes when I see this guy or this lady. Though people say, oh no, they are great. Don't feel, there's no, no connection, no chemistry.
Yeah, it's like
لا
some-
واحد لا
We interpret it like this. We interpret it that this is what Allah wants for the. And this is ununderstandable scenario. We don't understand. The Western scholars, they try to understand, but up to now there's no conclusion. No conclusion.
They concluded as a phenomenon.
Yeah, they've got just a phenomenon. But of course, what is phenomenon also? What does it mean, phenomenon? So, there are many questions. But they try to understand, which is okay. They try to understand. But for us, it's very clear, very clear. Allah made qabul for this person. You can find one sheikh, many sheikhs, talking to people about giving sermons of Jum'ah and other things. You'll find only one of them, or two of them. People like to listen. And maybe they are not that great, but people like them. They will follow what they're saying. And other people who will give a great khutbah, very sophisticated, very complicated, people don't like it. Why? Only Allah knows. Only Allah knows. I always say, why the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi is very well known across the Muslim world. Though many great scholars, other scholars, wrote 40 hadith, nobody else. Not only him. Why? Why a book like Riyadh al-Salihin? Maybe, I hope all of you know it, I hope. If you don't know it, and if you are in Islamic studies and you don't know Riyadh al-Salihin, better to get fired. But
أشهر كتاب
أشهر كتاب الإمام النووي هو يعاد يقال أنه هو أشهر كتاب بعد طبع في العالم كله بعد القرآن الكريم.
Riyadh al-Salihin, which is a small book, collection of hadith, and in each chapter you will start by some ayat and then the rest of the hadith. There are many books actually written by scholars similar to this book. And we know them, most of them are published. One of them is a book written by one of the professors of Imam Nawawi. He wrote a book exactly the same. Nobody knows. Only Riyadh al-Salihin. You go east, west, north, south, people will know Riyadh al-Salihin. Why? Because they have propaganda media. No, there's no media. The guy died already.
Imam al-Nawawi, when he died, someone asked him why he didn't get married. He said, I forget Allah.
Yeah, yes, true. It's true. Yes, he didn't get married. He died very young. And when people ask him why he didn't get, he said, if somebody reminded me, I would get married. He forgot. So, the issue of charisma, simply, without getting into too much details of it, can we make fake charisma? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. By psychology Can you make actual charisma? No. Full stop. No.
So charisma is a talent.
It's not a talent, it's a gift. It's not a talent. If I say talent means it's a feature inside me. But actually it's outside me.
Only
هذه هبة من الله وليست صفة. يعني الصبر صفة. الصبر صفة أنا ممكن أطورها. العلم صفة أنا ممكن أطورها. ولكن الحضور بره من الخارج. فليست لا هي موهبة ولا هي صفة شخصية. It's just a gift from outside. Gift from outside.
لكن ممكن يكتسب يا دكتور يعني. كيف؟ هو النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في الحديث انما زال
عبد يتقرب اليه بالنوافل حتى.
ايوه ماشي يكتسب بالطاعة.
ايوه
ايوه.
ايوه.
You can try to get it if you.
كيف يوضع له القبول؟
If you being a good Muslim and good believer and something like this, maybe Allah will give you this. But this needs to be done for the sake of Allah, not for the sake of have charisma. If you make it for the sake of having charisma, you will not get it. You will not get it. Okay? The last personal or competency that perseverance. Perseverance can be translated into Arabic into different terms. One of it is الثبات. الثبات. Can be translated in modern Arabic into the word الاستمرارية. Continuity. Continuity. This is a very important feature. And we know this, we are also supposed to train to this. We're supposed to train ourselves to have this. From where we got this one? From the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, many sources, but the simple one is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, خير الأعمال أدومها. The best of your action is the one that is continuous, even if it is small. The word continuous means you continue doing it without interruption. Consistency, perseverance. Sometimes people will have a rush of sudden rush of demand. Sometimes come boom, like this, and then he or she would say, "Okay, inshallah, I'm going to pray 20 rak'ah qiyam al-layl." And then usually when somebody will tell me this, I will tell him, brother or sister, please try to make it 2 rak'ah, not 20. But just keep the 2 rak'ah. Because most of the time, they will make the 20 rak'ah for 1 month, and after that they will do it. Most of the time. You make it 2 rak'ah, but you make it sustainable. Continue doing it until you die. And instead of making big promises, and then at the end of the day, so خير الأعمال is a very important concept, competency in Islamic leadership. And this is something we need to, all of us will need to develop continuously. You need to get things through. They call it in English like this. You need to get things through. You start to read a book. And then you read first 10 pages, 20 pages. And then after this, I'm bored. I won't continue. You will never build up anything like this. you will never build up anything. I had, he will come back, Brother Tariq. He was doing his master on tafsir, a certain tafsir. So when we're talking, I'm not his supervisor, but just it was a kind of a talk. I told him, you need to read this tafsir from A to Z, not to just pick it. Then you will learn. Otherwise you cannot. You find people making, especially Islamic studies, because Islamic studies there's bigger books usually, or human sciences. So he will say, I'm going inshallah to write down about Imam Abu Hamd al-Ghazali. What did you read about for Abu Hamd al-Ghazali? You discover that he read the Rasail, Abu Hamd al-Ghazali, small booklets of Abu Hamd al-Ghazali, and then he or she will perceive that he can write something about this guy. Impossible. Impossible. It's nonsense. You plan to do a project, you have to do it right. Otherwise, no way. I remember up till now, my supervisor, Allah, still alive, back in Egypt during my master, I was planning to do work on a new area. So when I first went to see him, he said, Walid, he put for me 6 references on the table. I still remember. Each one of them is 500 page plus. And he said, I don't want to see your face until you finish these 6 books. And then you come to talk to me. And these books were horrible. Literally horrible. I have to read to understand each book another 5 or 6 books. Because they are classic references. But this is how you learn. If you want to learn. If you don't want to learn, it's up to you. Everything will be shallow, will be very... So perseverance means I start a project, I need to complete it through. And do it properly. Otherwise, no way. The biography of Ibn Sina. I usually like to repeat this story. The biography, of course, Ibn Sina, by the way, he learned medicine by himself. Nobody trained him. Ibn Sina, the great medical scholar, he studied medicine by himself. And he studied philosophy by himself, the great philosopher. He said in his biography, his father sent him to a teacher for philosophy. But he sit down with him a couple of times, but he didn't like it. Because this guy doesn't understand anything. So he went by himself to study philosophy. One of the things, you can go back to his biography written by his one of his, a very famous biography, small, few pages. One of the things that he mentioned, that when he started to read Aristotle books, one of the books that he started to read for Aristotle, he said, I repeated 30 times. I did not understand a word. You imagine the torture. You are reading a book 30 times and you don't understand a word in the book, but you continue reading it. And then he said, so I have nothing to do except to ask Allah to open to me the understanding. So he said, I went, I made wudu, and then I went to pray 2 rak'ah asking Allah to open for me the understanding. And he said, I went out and I found some poor people, I give them charity with the intention that Allah will give me understanding. And according to the biography, he said, I didn't leave my place. Let's assume that this is the poor guy. He gave the poor guy money. And then he said, I didn't leave this place until I found our rock. This bookshop is an explanation of Aristotle by Al-Farabi. So I took this one and I understand now. How many of you read a paper that you don't understand in your field 2 times. I'm not saying 30 times.
أظن أن الكتب المفيدة في هذا الجانب كتاب الشيخ عبد الفتاح أبو جدة صفحات مصورة.
So this is training again. This is competency, perseverance. I have a project. I need to continue doing it until the end, and I need to do it properly. Yes, you might have PhD. Many people have PhDs. Alhamdulillah, many having PhDs. But how many of them are good scholars? Very few. In all fields. Islamic studies, engineering, medicine, very few. It's very easy. You are a PhD. I'm a doctor. Yes, I have a PhD. Very good. So what do you know? What do you know? You have a PhD. So what do you know? What do you know? And then you'll find that some of our colleagues, once he or she will graduate, they will write down in front of his name PhD, and then he will write some other short things, just to give the impression that he is a great scholar. But the question, what do you know? I don't need to have a, but I need to prove that I know what I'm talking about. That's what I need. If I prove to people I know what I'm talking about, I don't need even to have PhD. I don't need. Because people will acknowledge my knowledge. You will acknowledge that I'm a knowledgeable person. Finish.
العقاد مثلا مشهور.
Huh?
العقاد مثلا.
Yeah. Scholar. He didn't have except primary school only, and he was one of the great scholars in the modern history. He educated himself, and as I mentioned, Ibn Sina, the great scholar, he learned by himself philosophy, mathematics, and also medicine, and he became the. So, if you want to do something, and if you have this feature, Ibn Sina is a leader. Yes, he's a leader. He's a leader. And you need to ask yourself, can you be a leader in your field? I used to joke with some of our colleagues here in Viva. Most of the time in Viva here, we ask the students about their field. I remember my professors, the old ones, the new generation, but the old ones that examined me and examined my friends as well. They will never ask you about your thesis. They will never ask about your thesis. They will ask about the fundamentals of the subject. If you don't know, they will fail you. That's it. Very simple. If you don't know, they will fail you. And they have a very good justification. He said, how come I give you PhD or master, and you don't know the fundamentals of this subject? How come? Example in Islamic studies, some people talk about, for example, doing a PhD in usul fiqh. So instead of asking you about what you are talking, they ask you about the principles of usul fiqh. What is mafhum? What is mafhum mukhalafa? What is this type of thing? If you don't know, how come you have a PhD in usul fiqh and you don't know the basics? So this has been the, by the way, this has been the tradition. But now due to many bad things happening, we sometimes will be at ease with the student because if you don't finish it here, you finish it on the other side, and then. But the main thing is, whatever you have a PhD, you need to evaluate yourself. You are the person, whether you know or you don't know. You are the person who knows whether you know or you don't know. Okay? So this is intellectual leadership. We are talking here about people who will be, all of you will be intellectual leaders, at least. means supervisors leading students, talking to them, and other things. Okay, thank you very much. And this topic is quite large, in fact. I'm just pointing out to a few points. I hope you get some of the gist of this topic, and if you are interested, you try to learn more. You can try to check yourself. You need to read the Quran from a different point of view. Sometimes we read the Quran just very regular, very normal. If you read it very normal, you will not understand anything. You need to look into different views. Then you will learn. Otherwise, you will never learn. And so if you have any question, please. If you don't have any question, you want to go to sleep, also okay, no problem. Any comment? Yes, please, go ahead. تفضل. لا أنت تفضل.
As you mentioned, about the word qiyam in Arabic, you said that it's not political word right. But if we see it's mentioned in the Quran, also Khalifa mentioned in the Quran, also Wazir mentioned in the Quran. So what's the difference between Imam, Qa'id, Khalifa, and Wazir?
Okay, as I mentioned before, Khalifa or Wazir are specific political positions. Leadership is a general term. Leadership is a general term for leadership in any field, whether this field is intellectual, spiritual, political, or anything. So what the new term in Arabic is al-qiyada, which is okay, no problem. But because I'm talking about al-qiyada from Quran perspective, I have to come back to that the word ra'in and imam were the term used equivalent to what we use now as leadership. This is what I've said. But of course, yes, Quran is used the word wazir. But this wazir is actually not a common term. It's a term for specific situation.
in Surah Al-Baqarah, يقول الناس والتجارة يقول قائد.
صحيح، ولكن اللفظ الذي استخدم للقيادة إمام، وجعلنا منهم أئمة، ولم يستخدم قائد أو قيادة. ولكن طبعا الفعل هو يقول أو يأتي أو وعشان كده الترجمة المعاصرة أخذت من الفعل الاسم اللي هو القيادة، ولكن أقول إن هو لأنه if you try to read about leadership in older texts, you will not find a chapter called the qiyada. You will not find something like that. But the features of leadership, you will find it under what is written as al-imam in the classical book. This is the thing.
What's Khalifa?
Khalifa is a term for political leadership, but also it's used in the Quran in a different context. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about Adam that he is a Khalifa, it's not a political leader. But it's like a custodian, a person who will take care of this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala entrusted us to take care of the earth. This is the meaning of the term. Of course, it's a position of leadership. Yes, it is a position of leadership. But at the same time, we are just like a custodian. After this became also the development of the term Khalifa in Islam, we need to understand how it developed. When the Prophet ﷺ passed away, Abu Bakr didn't want to have a term which is lower, much more lower than the Prophet ﷺ. So he said, Khalifat Rasulillah. So the term Khalifa was coming from this origin. Abu Bakr, Khalifat Rasulillah. And then the rest, but of course after this it will be very long. Khalifat Rasulullah. So they changed it to be Amir al-Mu'minin. Amir al-Mu'minin. Okay?
I mentioned Ibrahim alayhi salam.
لا إبراهيم لا there's no word Khalifa for, as far as I know for Ibrahim. The only term for leadership is what our sister mentioned. إن إبراهيم كان أمة. إن إبراهيم كان أمة. Here much more bigger than just Imam. Imam, you are followed. Ummah means it's encompassing. Encompassing. So, a one guy by a nation. A one guy by a nation means what kind of leadership?
يا دكتور لعله يقصد سيدنا داود لما ربنا قال له يا داود إنا جعلناك خليفة في الأرض.
Okay, but this is coming into the same term, which is custodian, responsible, and also coming into the same political context, because Dawood was a king. Dawood was a king, so it's coming into the political context. In the wider context. Yes, politically, you can use Khalifa, that's fine, no problem. Or you can use Wazir as a term, or whatever. But the wider context, no. The Quran uses the word Imam as a wider context. ما ده اللي انا ذكرته.
We are all Khalifa.
Yeah, we are all Khalifa.
ممكن مصطلح دكتور يعني يستعمل في العموم ولا مصطلح سياسي خاص يعني.
I hope it clarifies. Any other comment or? No, can you raise your voice?
Can consider leadership to influence on others.
Okay.
Your brother is asking.
He's saying that can we consider leadership without influence on others? Can we consider Okay, there are two. I cannot claim for any person to be a leader, whether it's a leadership political or martial or intellectual or spiritual, unless we have two main things. Number one, this person needs to know very clearly where he or she is going. You cannot have a person, for example, a person posted as giving khutbah. The basic question I will ask this person who is giving sermon khutbah, why are you doing so? Why you are choosing these topics? If he cannot answer, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just opening the book about khutbah and listening. So this person can never be a religious leader, can never be a religious leader. Because he doesn't know what he's saying. He just read whatever people give. So clear vision is very important. I know the way. I know the way. This is number one. Another thing is the ability of to mobilize people voluntarily. The ability to mobilize people voluntarily. Without force. This is why when people talk about leadership position, for example, you are a manager now, or you are a head of department, or you are a dean, or whatever, or you are a minister. People clap when they see you and they say yes, yes, yes. If you want to test this guy is a leader or not, you see him or her after they quit the position. This will be the sign of leadership. If after quitting the position, people still follow. People look up for this person is the leader. Finish. If after he or she will quit the position, people will not look at him or not look at her or So this way, the ability to mobilize people voluntarily. When we talk about intellectual, for example, intellectual leadership, some people in many countries, they can just write a column in the newspaper. The second day, everybody will be talking about this topic. This is intellectual leadership. The influence, huge influence. A khatib, a person who will give then everybody will go out, they will spread what he said to every place. This is influence, voluntarily. He didn't tell them, please buy my CD, and then you No, you just say the khutbah and then you walk away. But people will get the video of this khutbah or the recording, and then they will just distribute it everywhere. He didn't tell them so. Just a voluntarily able to mobilize. So there is no leadership without these two, definitely. There's no leadership without these two. Otherwise, yeah, we have many great scholars. We have many great scholars, but nobody knows about them. So they are not leaders. They are knowledgeable persons. They have no influence, zero influence. Zero influence. Leadership is influence. I change you. If I don't change you, there's no leadership. Yes?
I want to ask about the charisma. There is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, الناس معادن خيارهم في الجاهلية خيارهم في الإسلام إذا فقهوا. That means it is something that like you will born with this character. Is it the same of?
No, it's not the same. هذا حول الصفات الإنسانية. لا حول الصفات الإنسانية. يعني على سبيل المثال عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه كان محاربا، ولكن صفاته الأصلية صفات كان رجل يتحمل مسؤولية وهكذا، ولذلك دعا النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فهنا الناس معادن على الصفات الإنسانية. صفات إنسانية يعني بالتعبير العامي في بلادنا في العالم العربي ابن الناس وابن ناس.
الأخلاق يا دكتور.
الطباع الأخلاقية.
This is not competence as much as your inherited personal traits. So I was just giving the example for the sister, the famous when the Prophet ﷺ made dua, اللهم أعز الإسلام بأحد عمرين. So Allah support Islam by converting one of the two Umar. The two Umar were Umar bin Khattab and the other one was Abu Jahl, Amr bin Hisham. You know this. Why Amr bin Hisham? Because the features. No, the features. This guy was up front. He was not like this. When he was against the Prophet, he was. So this is a character, not a person who will go around and color himself. No. So the Prophet showed that these characters are good characters.
In the second point, ability to
Mobilize.
I can say that the speaker must have a power of possibility.
يعني
الخطيب أو القائد يجب أن يمتلك قوة الإقناع.
طبعا persuasion. The ability to persuade. Because if you don't persuade people, they will not. You will not mobilize them. If you don't persuade people, you will not mobilize them. Yeah, for example, I gave a khutbah on being honest. Everybody in the masjid are lying, are dishonest, and they will go out from the masjid being more dishonest. So I have zero influence. Zero. Zero. But if I'm able to make people think that you are doing a horrible act, and then they start to question this after they go out, قوة الإقناع، قوة التأثير.
Sir,
Yes.
So, also in the, you said in Islam, if someone asks for the position, he is not the one that should be in that position. But now the process is very different. Like in political, it is very short. You have to, if you want to make a change, you have to be in this field like for 10 years or something to go to the head. If someone is fine in himself, like he can do a different, if he stay out of the game, he will never do anything.
No, okay, this one is, there is a very interesting point in the Islamic concept here. There is, the modern concept is nomination. Here, nomination. People nominate X to be in this position.
Yes.
And Islam agree on this concept. I will not nominate myself. People nominate me. In fact, if you look carefully at this, especially in political positions, if people nominate me, means I have a ground support. If I nominate myself, maybe I imagine myself I have ground support, but I don't. And then I will discover it very late. People will sell me at any corner. So the concept, the same concept for this political issue specifically, I see it very, very good in fact, that you don't nominate yourself. People nominate you. If people nominate you, you have support. But if nobody nominates me, means I have no support. I have no support. I might be a good person, but I have no support. I cannot do any change. I don't do anything. Yes.
الحمد لله القائل أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا رسوله وأولي الأمر منكم وإن تنازعتم في شيء فردوه إلى الله ورسوله إن كنتم تؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا. أما بعد, mine is a brief comment, but first and foremost, we have to thank our great Sheikh for what you have shared with us. جزاكم الله خيرا وبارك الله فيك وزادك الله إيمانا وعلما وإخلاصا وهدى وتقوى.
آمين جميعا.
Alhamdulillah. Apart from this, there is one point that I would like to mention to us.
Okay, good.
That has to do with ilm, knowledge. So you may mention وقت واجب.
واجب الوقت.
نعم واجب الوقت. ما شاء الله. So and something from Imam al-Ghazali, he made mention in Al-Mutahu Dar al-Sa'ada, one book written by al-Ghazali. He says knowledge is broadly classified into two, and ilm al-Ismani, ilm al-Kawni or ilm al-Shari, the acquired knowledge and the religious knowledge. To me, what I understand by this, it is compulsory for every Muslim to seek for the religious knowledge, as Prophet ﷺ mentioned in so many hadith. For example, so I do agree and believe that there is a specification, as we mentioned, because of the situation. Yes, for seeking that kind of knowledge is now compulsory. But apart from that, if we can exempt that one, then it is wajib for every Muslim to seek for religious knowledge. And this is the kind of knowledge that will benefit us in dunya and akhirah. So to me, I understand what you have mentioned, and I hope all of us have understand what you have said.
There's no discussion about it. But what I mean is sometimes you go for some details which are not the required one now. But of course, basic Islam need to be clear cut. This is our wajib. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, if no comments or questions.